The Swan is the second short film in Wes Anderson's Henry Sugar collection, and here's the real meaning of Peter Watson's story and the Swan. Although Roald Dahl is known for his stories aimed at children, the short story collection The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Six More is aimed at a slightly older audience, touching on more serious themes but all of them with Dahl's unique style. Roald Dahl and Wes Anderson might seem like an odd combination, but The Swan proves it's actually an interesting mix, taking the audience to meet three young boys, Ernie, Raymond, and Peter. For his birthday, Ernie was given a rifle, and with his friend Raymond, they went out to see what they could kill. After shooting various small birds, Ernie and Raymond found young Peter Watson looking at birds on trees with his binoculars. Ernie and Raymond went after Peter and, pointing him with the rifle, put his life at risk by tying his arms and legs and laying him on the rail tracks. That was only the beginning of an evening of torture for Peter, which included the shooting of a swan and a near-death experience for the young boy. Given Anderson's approach, the ending of The Swan can be confusing, along with the inspiration behind Dahl's story and the real meaning of the story. As mentioned, The Swan is one of many short stories found in Roald Dahl's The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Six More collection, but Anderson's adaptation reveals it was based on a true story. The Swan ends with a card explaining the story was inspired by a newspaper account of an actual event. Dahl kept the news clipping in his ideas book for 3 decades, until he finally used it for a story in October of 1976, resulting in The Swan. However, it's unknown what exactly was the story that inspired Dahl's The Swan, as there are no records or hints of an event like that made it to the newspapers. What happened to Peter in The Swan? Peter managed to survive being tied to the rail tracks and the upcoming train by moving his head and creating an indentation so he could rest his head there and not be injured. However, this was only the beginning of more bullying from Ernie and Raymond, who then untied Peter's feet and took him to a lake. Ernie and Raymond planned to throw Peter into the lake, but when they saw a swan on its nest in the middle of the lake, Ernie decided to kill it. Peter, who loved birds, got angry at Ernie and tried to get him to not kill the swan, but he still shot it in the head. Ernie and Raymond then forced Peter to go into the lake and take the swan, with Peter discovering the swan's babies in the nest. Angry because of what they just did, Peter told Ernie and Raymond they were the ones who should be dead. Ernie then cut the swan's wings, added pieces of string to them, and put them on Peter, who he then forced to climb to the top of a weeping willow and then jump and spread his wings. Peter, seeing the tree as a safe space from the bullies, decided to climb to the highest branch and stay there, but he wasn't counting on Ernie using his rifle. As Peter refused to jump, Ernie shot at him but missed, and as he refused again, Ernie shot at him again and hit him in the leg. Peter was knocked off balance and hung from the branch, which started to break. The Swan then cuts to Roald Dahl telling the rest of the story. As Peter hung from the branch, he saw a bright light in the middle of the lake, beckoning him. Peter dived towards the light and spread his wings, creating the image of a big, white swan flying over the village. In fact, 3 people in town said they saw a white swan circling over the village that morning. Dahl then reveals that Peter's mother saw something huge and white crashing in her garden, and it was Peter with the swan wings. Although Anderson's The Swan leaves Peter's fate somewhat ambiguous, showing adult Peter on the ground while young Peter stares at him, the original tale reveals he didn't die, but he did faint after telling his mother his leg hurt. It's implied, then, that in Anderson's version, the same happened to Peter, and that's why he can now tell his story as an adult. The Swan is a story of bullying, a theme that is present in many of Roald Dahl's stories, and by isolating Peter and his bullies, it shows the hopelessness and pressure that bullied people feel. By showing both young and adult Peter with the swan's wings, the Swan shows how the trauma of bullying can stay with a person for many, many years, and it's a bittersweet message as adult Peter represents hope, as he survived everything Ernie and Raymond put him through, but also pain as it's clearly a traumatic event he has carried with him for years. Swans symbolize wisdom, innocence, beauty, evolution, and awakening the power of self, all of which can be linked to young Peter Watson. The Swan is a tale of Peter's loss of innocence, but also of how something else was awakened in him after he stood up to the bullies and became the Swan himself, thus also representing evolution. Wes Anderson's The Swan is equal parts sweet and heartbreaking, as it's never easy to see someone else being bullied and put into dangerous situations for the amusement of others.